Here we're going to talk about test taking and study skills. First, let's talk about, since you've been here, you've heard a lot about learning style. Finding your learning style is actually very important. And I want to recommend a book called How We Learn. But just something to think about. A lot of times we feel like we can't understand or we can't grasp something when it's really the fact that we haven't really mastered how to learn that particular subject. So one of the things we want to ask, am I auditory learner? Do I learn just by hearing and listening? Am I a tactile learner? Do I need to do hands-on? Am I visual? You know, if I see a graphic or if I see an animation, will that help me to understand a particular concept? Or am I a combination type learner? Do all three of these different styles fit me? One of the things to think about is you know, depending on which discipline you're in, it may call for a different approach to learning. Like, you know, for instance, architecture may be difficult to learn in an auditory fashion, but it may be a lot easier to learn actually sitting down with some paper and drawing up your own blueprints. So it just depends on what your style is, and it's really critical to kind of figure that out as soon as you can, because it makes all the difference in the world as far as your comprehension, your confidence, and so on and so forth. So let's keep going and talk about what learning is. Learning, just by definition, is the acquisition of knowledge or the acquisition of skills through experience, study, or by being taught. A second way to think about learning is that it's modifying your behavior based on that acquired knowledge. So learning is not just acquiring knowledge, but, you know, modifying your behavior based on what you know or what you've learned. It's important to understand that learning is a process and that it never stops. You are at this point, you should be committed to being a lifelong learner. What that means is that you're always learning, you're always open to new ideas, you're always listening. This is a graphic of Bloom's taxonomy, and what Bloom's taxonomy is just a paradigm for learning. Notice how each level is built on the previous level. So understanding is built on remembering, applying is built on understanding, and so on and so forth. You see on the left side what the definitions of these things are, where remembering is just retrieving, recognizing, and recalling relevant knowledge from long-term memory. Notice it's the lowest on the paradigm. As you go up to applying, that's carrying out or using a procedure through executing or implementing. And then let's look on this side. You see on the lower levels in high school, you're expected to, you know, construct meaning from graphic messages and interpret or classify or compare things and explain things. When you get to the undergraduate level, it's a little bit different, and it's a little bit of a shock that you are expected to take material and break it up into its pieces, and then figure out how those pieces relate to one another. You know, and then on the graduate level, you're expected to take pieces and put them together as a whole, and even reorganize those pieces. So you created new information based on information that you've organized. So what the pyramid depicts again is levels of thinking when we use learning. And notice again, I say each level builds on the previous level, or what's on the lower level has to be learned before you can use the skill that's above it. So now let's talk about some study tips. We talked about this in class, and I just want to refresh your memory and reiterate it. Study cycle, and that's this smaller circle here. Notice is previewing, so 5-10 minutes before class, looking back over your notes. Attending and participating, again, that's the time, the 50 minutes or 1 hour that you spend in class. And then reviewing, meaning when you get out of class, take 5 or 10 minutes to go over your notes, fill in your gaps, compare notes with a classmate or whatever. All right. Notice here these intense study sessions, anywhere from 20 to 75 minutes, but not longer than that, for any one period of time. And after each one of these intense study sessions, be it whether you're outlining the chapter, whether you are combining information from your other resources on a particular topic, whatever it is you're doing, at the end of the time period, you should take a break. That way your brain doesn't get overwhelmed. Right? And then notice here also a weekly review. Right? So at the end of every week, you should be going back through your notes and compiling everything, looking over everything, and just to kind of see where you are. So make sure at the end of every week, you're sitting down, taking some time to organize your information and review. Now, I want to point something out. Look at how much of this takes place outside of class. The preview is outside of class. The review is outside of class. The study session is outside of class. The weekly review, that's outside of class. What you have to understand is that learning is your responsibility. And if you're studying, you have to spend some time outside of class. 90% of your learning is going to take place outside of the classroom. Think about it. Out of 16 weeks, you're in class 2 to 3 times per week, 1 hour each, or an hour and a half if it's a Tuesday and Thursday class. And yet, you have more time outside of class. And so what that means is that you have to spend more time studying and preparing outside of class, and not just depending on the 1 hour or the 1 hour and a half class period to get all of your information. So here's some helpful study tips. Number 1, know what you're studying. Number 2, what's the significance of what you're studying? How does this relate to the class? How does it relate to the upcoming exam? How does it relate to what we talked about in class in the previous class period? I always ask this question: can the information be broken into smaller pieces? It's much easier to study smaller pieces of information than it is to study information in large chunks. Can you create an outline? If you're studying a particular chapter in a book, can that chapter be outlined? Can you go through and pick out the headings and then pick out the subheadings, and then any definitions or bold-faced words that are in the chapter? Can you go through and pick that out? Have you pre-read the chapter? A lot of times, if you prepare your mind for what's ahead by pre-reading open and just skimming the chapter before you actually start reading it, then you're much less likely to fall asleep while you're reading the chapter or to zone out while you're reading the chapter. Have you tried to solve problems at the end of the chapter? Most of the times, if you're taking a science course or a math course, there are problems that are associated with what you're doing, and you can actually try and solve those problems. And if you get stuck, that's a great moment for you to go and see your instructor. Can you teach it to someone else? This really says a lot about whether or not you've learned the information and actually know it, is if you can communicate that information to another person who may be struggling to understand it. Here's a take-home message: good study skills will translate into better grades 99.9% of the time. So let's talk about some test-taking strategies really quickly. First of all, if you know you have an exam coming up, my recommendation is not to cram, not to stay up all night trying to study for that exam. Get rest before the night before the exam. Studies show that if your brain is well rested, you recall information a lot better than if your brain is exhausted and your body is exhausted from cramming or from staying up all night. You need to start studying before the exam, not the night before, maybe 2 to 3 weeks before. From the syllabus the exam date, every upcoming exam date, and so you want to start studying for exam 2 as soon as you take exam 1. When that's done, you want to already be preparing for exam 2. Students always ask for study guides. The best study guide is your syllabus. Use your syllabus to map out exam topics. The learning outcomes for every class are in the syllabus. And if you look in the syllabus and look at the learning outcomes, you will have a study guide for every exam based on what's in the syllabus. That's simple, and it's something that's at your immediate disposal. Everybody has a syllabus. Every student that's enrolled gets a syllabus, and so that's at your immediate disposal. Get to class a little bit early on test day so you can relax, you can get a good seat, you can get comfortable, Stay relaxed during the exam. Pre-read the exam. If time permits, flip through it and see where the hard questions are, see where the easier questions are. Boost your confidence by taking those easy questions and knocking those out first. Most of all, read the instructions. Do not take an exam without reading the instructions or reading through the problems. Then you want to ask yourself, what type of exam am I taking? If it's a multiple choice exam, make sure you read the questions carefully and then immediately rule out the wrong, like those answers that you know are just incorrect, and ask yourself, why are they incorrect? If there's a distractor on the exam, rule it out. A distractor is just a choice out of your multiple choice answers that is just there. It cannot be the right answer at all, and so that you can rule out immediately. Don't blindly guess, but guess intelligently based on the information that you already have. And if it's a short answer test or essay test, read it carefully, write incomplete sentences, and try to understand what the question is asking you before you start to answer that question. As always, if you have any questions, you can tweet, you can email, or you can drop by my office. Peace.